It's Friday.
I was waiting for you to go.
It's Friday. Welcome, everyone, to the Pirates of Finance. We are your hosts, the handsome man with the less attractive camera. I don't know what I'm saying here.
Come on, man. Don't do that to me right now.
The man with the glitchy camera problems across the digital table from me is the one and only Jason Buck. Jason, what are you drinking there? Have we gone hard liquor already?
I'm glad you asked, Corey. No, I'm working on my I've been texting you actually. I'm always working on my grapefruit shandy game. So I've perfected my ratios of espresso to grapefruit, sparkling grapefruit, and I use Fever Tree sparkling grapefruit. And then today I'm trying to perfect the cold brew and sparkling grapefruit, but I'm not getting the cold brew right amount. So like I'm trying to figure it out. It sounds like it's disgusting, but when you try it, and the first time I tried it was like La Colombe years ago, it's actually delicious and it really works. But now you're gonna piss me off because I saw you drink your coffee. Do you have milk in your coffee again?
No, it's cashew milk.
Oh, okay.
Wait, I got a question. You used the word shandy there. This is where I
Yeah.
feel like you're about to drop a knowledge bomb on me.
Oh,
Shandy, I always think about as being lemonade and beer. And then I think of a Radler as being any other sort of fruit cocktail or fruit drink and beer. You're using shandy there without the beer part. I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah, I don't know if La Colombe kind of took liberties with that, but I think like anytime, you use lemonade and then that's going to be a shandy, like you said, typically with beer, but I think you can use it with, other mixes, or you're just taking liberties. And then they also, I think they call their cold brew and lemonade a shandy as well at La Colombe. But that's, it reminds me, is like, you might not know this, but a buck is actually any alcohol drink with ginger beer.
Have we discussed why something's called an old-fashioned before on this show?
Yes, we have.
Well, this is the Pirates of Finance, where, again, we talk about things that have nothing to do with capital markets or economics or really anything. I'm Jason's co-host, Corey Hofstein. Nothing we say or do on this show is financial advice. We might give drink advice. Sounds like Jason's trying to perfect his non-alcoholic beverage there. And when he has it dialed in, I'm sure he will recommend it to all of us. Feel free to take that advice. Just don't take any of the financial advice. None of this is financial advice. None of it's accounting advice, tax advice, legal advice. Get all that from a qualified professional that you engage with. With that, Jason, I have one thought and one thought only about this week, which is, why is everyone on my timeline, every mouth-breathing macro economist in agreement that this is a bear market rally? Since the low, what was it, October, November? Everyone has agreed this is a bear market rally. We're in an inflationary bear market. It's quad 4. I literally do not see a single dissenting opinion on my timeline from anyone saying anything other than the recession is coming, the Fed's going to have to cut. Either this is the most telegraphed recession in the world and equity prices are just going to look completely foolish, or the market's overlooking the chasm and all of these people are on the wrong side of the trade.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we always talk about. People speak their own book, or we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. And I would guess your FinTwit feed is filled with people that are relatively intelligent. So those people generally are going to be bears, right? They're going to worry about the worst case scenarios. So I would like not to just like overarchingly just kind of cut it off, but that's how I think about it. And people, are just wanting to see what they want to see. It's like things we're always talking about on the show is, I was trying to think earlier. It's like we always talk about Dunning-Kruger or Gell-Mann. We need some like Anais Nin or something, like we see things as we are, not as they are. Like that's going to be like a general theme, I think, to most of our, even the questions I have for you today, or how we look at things. And so, yeah, everybody, like last year was a bear market. So it's a continuation of that, right? And they want to hate, this, if it is a rally, or, they're going to be wrong, and then they'll flip around and see, I told you this was the rally that started it all. Everybody's a flip flopper.
Someone had a great quote they said to me on my timeline, which is something to the effect of, every bull market started with a failed bear market rally.
Yeah.
Right?
Or I think you said to somebody, or I think you were even talking to Tyler's, like, or maybe somebody else, like, every stock market rally climbs a wall of worry, right? Like we have all these tropes. This was interesting. I was, I did I recorded with Jared Dillon earlier this week, and we have all these tropes, but like I really wonder how much, like, as we get older, we become much more like not that we are like, but similar to like just theory to Howard Marks and like Warren Buffett, when they have really simple tropes, right? Like markets go up and down. This too shall pass. It's just like, this is what we come down to, right? Like, how can you call it this is a dead cat bounce or bear market rally? Like, you only know that in hindsight. So I don't see that the point is on speculating on what it potentially will be. But by the way, what are you doing? You're jumping right into markets. We don't do that here.
I know. Well, listen, you brought up Warren Buffett here. There was a great Twitter thread going around 2 days ago, 3 days ago. I've lost all concept of time. WB taking a trip to Japan, his first trip to Japan in a very long time, significantly increasing his stake among these really interesting, like, I guess you would consider them conglomerates. They trade with a decently high correlation to commodities. These Japanese companies. He owned like 3%, and he bought them as a basket. So he owns like 5% of each of these 5 companies. The original trade he financed with a bond denominated in yen, super low interest rates. This recent purchase, he did the same. First time around, he didn't have to go to Japan. He just went to Japan for the first time in forever. Great little conspiracy thread going around that he went because he wanted to meet the new Bank of Japan. Why am I blanking on the word here? Kaddora's out, the new guy taking his place. And that WB wanted to go in.
Meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
Yeah, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Want to go in, shake the hand, see what things were like. And the conspiracy here was he clearly wanted to finance his position. He was trying to figure out whether he had to do it immediately because rates would be going up and he wanted to lock in that low interest rate, or whether he had time. The signal now being WB pulled the trigger. He issued that bond. Rates in Japan set to go up under the new administration of the Bank of Japan. What do you think about this awesome conspiracy theory?
Dude, this is one of my favorite topics, and like, because Buffett, like a lot of things we talk about, is a Rorschach. And what I can't stand is people, if they just go back and look at historically, you know how many boner moves he's made historically? Tons of them. So why do we like pick apart everything he does as like this genius move? Maybe you just don't see it yet. And like everybody's worried about him. Like, I don't know about you, but
it's a 7-dimensional chess here that we're trying to read into.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, well, maybe he's actually just playing checkers. I mean, yeah, I think he's a very smart guy, but his game, I think, is just checkers.
Yeah. Like, or he just like, everybody goes, well, he's so quick to move. Like, he'll put a term sheet and buy companies. I'm like, yeah, because he doesn't do due diligence and he gets a lot of shit wrong. Like, why do we exalt this? It's crazy to me. By the way, I was trying to, we always fuck up our vocab words, but it's like, I was going septuagenarian, octogenarian. What's in 90s? I know in the comments. But once again, like, I'm not like, I don't care what he does. I just don't care. Like, and I'm just tired of everybody jerking off to him. Like, who cares?
This is like when Munger was trying to build that college campus building. And everyone's like, well, he's giving the money. He should be able to design it. It's like, dude literally built a prison. And they're like, yeah, but he makes so much money. He must know what he's doing. It's like, having made money does not make you a qualified architect for college dorms. Like, what is wrong with people?
I like his after the fact justification with like, yeah, it doesn't have any exterior windows, but it has interior windows. I talked to cruise ships. It's like a cruise ship. It just has interior windows. But thanks, George, in the comments. He said nonagenarian, and I'll be able to remember that one hopefully for like Nana, like your Italian grandma. Yeah,
yeah, I love it. I love those little mental hacks.
By the way, just to change subjects, but shout out to Jordan and the Booty Crew. He said this is the first time he's watching live. So happy to have you live.
Appreciate you, Jordan.
Yeah, he said, let's get weird. Welcome to Pirates. That's what we do. But because you front ran me and jumped right into markets, you don't realize I have 2 bones to pick with you.
Just 2.
By the way, is that one of your phrases you don't like too? I hope it is.
Bones like, to pick? Where's it come from?
I have no idea.
Well, see, don't throw a phrase at me, Jason, if you don't know where it comes from.
No, it's not a phrase. It's a filler word. I don't know how to talk, so I use filler phrases. But anyway, two things.
Pick your bones, my friend.
One, by the way, Darren's in here. What's up, Darren? Darren and I were just texting before we got on here. But these sweaters, brilliant idea in the winter. terrible idea in the summer.
I agree. I really, I don't want to say I fucked us, but we might have to find some t-shirts.
I was gonna like make an excuse today and everything. I'm sweating to death right now.
Yeah.
In the Northeast, it's extra hot. I'm sure it's hot in Florida, but like
Not
this is
great.
a terrible idea. Just
Not great. I was very close to just wearing nothing under it. Very close.
I know that's your move. I was going to too, but I'd destroy this thing if I wore nothing under.
Well, what's going to happen is you would think, okay, as the summer goes on, you're going to stop seeing gray, because what will happen is I will sweat through this. So I'll either have to go white, in which it becomes see-through, or I'll have to use my black one where you won't see me sweat through it.
Yeah.
We got to start making our own merch.
That's a terrible call. The other one that I have to pick with you, the other bone, your other femur, if you will, is I went to get my hair cut this morning, and you really messed my life up. Every time I get a haircut, I'm like, what is everybody going to think of my P&L? Am I supposed to not get my hair cut anymore? Am I going for full ZZ Top here? What are we supposed to do?
I'm in your head.
You're living rent free in my head.
Yeah. Listen,
so
it is a perfect indicator as far as my track record goes. By the way, it might be a top indicator that when someone is that arrogant that they're not cutting their hair anymore, they might start making some bad decisions.
Oh, now you're flipping it around.
Yeah. No, it's about past track record. And as we know, Jason, past performance is not indicative of future results. Yeah.
I like Dread Pirate Dunn said a vest would be a boner move for sure. We definitely should get vests. We should get we should get Patagonia vests.
Oh, that's great. Didn't Patagonia stop making merch for banks?
I don't know. We probably
sure they did.
I think we're probably getting too old to wear things ironically anyway, right? So everybody just look at us as the boners we are.
Well, they would definitely look at me and be like, he actually has that vest. It's not ironic. He's a finance bro.
Exactly. Well, yeah, you look, and you're a Chad Lax bro by definition too.
Absolutely. And I haven't gotten a haircut in a while, so the lettuce in the back is really starting to flow. That's why I won't turn my head beyond a certain degree in the camera.
I love lettuce. I love that one. I always call it your kitchen. You got to clean up your kitchen. All right, moving on to other things. So
that wasn't, it's funny. I thought you were going to pick another bone with me. Because I texted you earlier this week saying I wanted to start a private rum room, and you got really mad at me, justifiably. But let me tell you my thoughts. So in the town I live in, there was this hotel that I didn't know when I moved here was for sale. It's this really cute little boutique hotel. And this young guy bought it, and he's renovating it, and he just put in a new bar that's super clean looking, and he bought the building next door, and he turned it into a wine house where they play live music and wine. He's made a few weird decisions. Like the wine house also has a smoker out back. So that's a little bit weird, because you're sitting out listening to live music, getting brisket in the face with your wine. Not how I would think about a wine bar. And when you go to get food, like my wife and I went on Sunday to get a cocktail at the hotel bar, wanted some little afternoon appies, and they were still serving Sunday morning brunch. So the only thing we could order was pancakes. Again, a little weird. They're working through the kinks. But I had this thought, which was like, it would be really cool. He's renovating all the rooms. If I said, give me a room on the first floor, and I'm going to turn that into a private rum room. Like, members only. I'm using air quotes here. Members only, right? You got to get members in. You got to create that faux, like, high top end rum, limited seating. And I could just build a rum collection in there. And I was like, a really cool potential concept, because I could avoid having to pay for the space, like the whole building, but I get the benefits of his building. He could jack up some of the liquor prices. I think it could be a win-win, Jason. And that's where my dreams went. And like this beautiful bird flying in the sky, you just shot them down violently.
No, that is not true at all. What the point was of my retort, it was, I've been talking to you about this for years. And then but like Inception, you always go, I have a great idea. And I go, you mean the one I've been pitching to you every month for the last 18 months straight?
No, you pitched me an idea, and I took that coal and turned it into a diamond. Okay. I refined it and worked on it, mentally tumbled it until that was a polished, smooth stone.
So, by the way, when you brought up pancakes, it made me think of Dr. David Roney, who is a member of the Booty Crew. Usually, there's somebody's got to have a meme as soon as you said pancakes of him just like flipping the table over and be like, "Fuck this, I'm out of here." Like, especially you, like that was your only choice was pancakes.
You know, I love pancakes. It's just when I was drinking a traditional daiquiri, pancakes weren't the first thing I wanted.
There's a yeah, that's a tough one. Going sweet on sweet and oh, that's tough. So there's a cigar shop or cigar club, private members club in Chicago called the Clayton, and the guy's name's Clay. So you'll love this. I think his dad owned like Tommy Bahama or something. So obviously they have a bunch of money, and he bought like this 3-4 story building in Chicago and just kitted it out like to the night, like just way over the top, like just absolutely ridiculous. Like the ground floor is this unbelievable humidor. They have an unbelievable wine room. They have all these lounges and everything, and like you can become a member. It's like basically really like a high end like WeWork actually. But you'll love too was like he would for the members like you'd have to come meet with him personally, and he'd spend like how many amount of time with you, and if you like the cut of your jib, you were in. But if you didn't, he's like, you're out. Like I don't need the money. So it's just basically became like who's cool with Clayton
friends,
yeah, with Clay. So you're probably reducing the cognitive diversity there. But it was I thought you'd like that, and it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen, like completely overbuilt. But it reminded me of also I was watching Grant Williams did this kind of series on like the forefront of sports technology innovation, and the founder of Aura, I'm gonna forget his name, but he's from Canberra, Australia. And when he was trying to raise money to start his tech company, he's like, I got an idea. I'll start a bar to raise money for my tech. Like, who thinks like, let me start something that historically loses money, right? But he decides to start a bar. He puts his like life savings into it. Like, I think it was like 130K, right? But what I found out is like within 3-4 months, he had made his money back and they were cash flow positive. And then he started using that money. Yeah, he started using that money to then fund his sports tech company with Aura. And so what's interesting though is I think later in the story, and I was trying to find more information on it. It's really interesting because then you're like, well, how many bars do you own now? And he's like 7, I think. And he's like, wait. And he's like, but they're all
success.
Yeah. He goes, they're all in the same building. And I'm like, wait, what? And so I'm still trying to find out more. And he said, yeah, we have like we have a rare whiskey bar, we have like a tequila bar, we have like a pirate bar, whatever. Like there were all these like themes. And so what I think I figured out is like I think he copied the ideas from Nomiyas in Tokyo. Do you know what those are? They're basically like tiny bars that are basically like 6 to 8 seats, and they have like one really distinct specialty. But you'll find like alleyways in Tokyo where they're all like kind of lined up, and you can just kind of go from one to the next. But like when you go in, it's like 50 to 100 square feet, and it's just one person, maybe 6 to 8 stools, and it's usually like hyper focused. So that's what I think he did in the same building. Is when new spaces came available, he's like, oh, I got an idea for a rum bar. Let me do that. Like, or I have an idea for, a tiki bar. Like, just kind of just went from one to the next. But like, talk about the craziest founder story like I've ever heard.
I was thinking about, because I was just fantasizing about this rum room, because it would be a fun passion project for me. I have no intentions of it actually being cash flow positive. But it got me thinking about our conversation last week about the equity risk premium, about the idea of demanding an expected return for higher risk. And it got me thinking about why are so many people trying to start restaurants when you know that restaurants and bars are a horrible business? Like just statistically, they are a horrible business to be in. And yet there is a non-stop line of people who want to do it. Like what there, it feels like there's a big disconnect in what sort of businesses people pursue. Obviously the utility function of what they're trying to do must not be purely monetary, or they haven't looked into the money behind it. But it's like rationally it seems like we should have way less restaurants than we do.
Yes, because your brain works than restaurateurs, because restaurants are sexy as fuck, and that's why people want to own them. And more importantly, they want to own them because usually your hostesses, as you get older, they stay the same age, and so most people that are investors in restaurants like to post up at the bar and say they own the place, and it's a way for them. It's a Dan Bilzerian move, right? Like everything is context and positioning, and so they're just trying to position themselves in a bright shining light. So that way they don't have to like tap girls on the shoulder, and vice versa. It works for guys, girls, vice versa.
That's a very expensive way to get attention.
It is an extremely expensive way to get attention, but if you have another business, it's a way, you know,
So
there's
you're saying
all,
it's the trophy. It's the trophy
yeah,
purchase.
yeah,
Like,
except for I think I told you before, the way I looked at it that an older restaurateur taught me that I thought was brilliant is like buy the building. Like that's how you do it. So like if you buy a building, especially if you're value add and that building can be repositioned or renovated, basically you have a free call option on your restaurant on that ground floor. And if your restaurant fails, which it will, then you can release it to somebody for like 5x the price of that lease rate. And so,
yeah.
and part of the renovation process is like you finance for the entire building. So it's a way to have like kind of a call option when you're doing restaurants. To me, that's the only semi at least structured or safer way of doing it.
It's an expensive way of doing it. I think most people trying to start a restaurant are throwing money together to try to get it done. But I guess if you're doing
Well,
it from the
yeah.
corporate perspective, yes.
Well, as you know, though, my brother owns a restaurant in Charleston, and him and I used to debate this. And I told him a million times, like, if you have to raise several $100,000 or more to do a restaurant, you're likely just throwing that money away, right? And so, at least if you have a building that's secured through the commercial real estate, people love real estate and people love to invest that way, and you can get a mortgage on it. So that's why you structure it that way, is you create optionality. And then people, even though you may have to raise like to buy a $5 or $10 million building instead of like 500,000 for the restaurant, you've secured it with the commercial real estate. And then when you fail, you have a higher lease rate. So you've actually improved the property and likely improved the cap rate. So it is actually a better way of doing it, but it's harder to raise that more money. But I would argue it's easier because people love investing in real estate projects. People burn their money on a restaurant.
Given the current discussion about commercial real estate and the difficulties commercial real estate is having, are you talking about potentially a golden era of restaurateurs going forward? The opportunity to swoop in, buy some prime commercial real estate, try your hand at being a restaurateur, and if you fail, well, you've improved the building anyway?
Yes and no. Like it does excite me in that way, in the sense, but like almost like you were saying about this is a bear market rally, is like, you know, are we at peak sentiment for CRE, or is it about to get a lot worse here? Like it's, or is this is about to turn around? I have no idea. You know, you and I can't time anything. What I thought was fascinating is actually over the last, you know, several decades, as those rent rates went through the roof in Manhattan or LA or San Francisco, you had this diaspora of restaurateurs going back to their hometowns. So they were trained in some of the finest restaurants in the world, and then they're going to these second or tertiary cities where they could get cheaper lease rates, whether it's like Asheville, Nashville, you know, any smaller town, and building out beautiful restaurants. So I think a lot of people have already moved out, but like you said, I get excited for maybe these real estate crashes, because then you have like artists and restaurateurs can move back in and get decent lease rates. Like what artist could ever live in Manhattan ever again unless we have a traumatic real estate crash?
I don't want to chirp at you, but I love that you chose Asheville and then Nashville. Like, like I was waiting for like Zashville, Trashville. Like you're Dr. Seuss over there.
Nice. Okay. Is it, yeah, what other bill could I come up with that has a good restaurant scene? I don't know. But also I wanted to come up, and of course, Dennis Davitt, shout out to Dennis. Dennis lives in Nashville. So he's yum, 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 yum. He's just eating up all of those good restaurants in Nashville. So he's taking good part in this diaspora, and he's actually part of the diaspora. Like people are moving for a better quality of life. And I think it's interesting, these small towns. And, you know, I think there's a brilliant dichotomy between tech and real world. You know, as Zoom culture, the diaspora due to the pandy wandy is like, we get to live a much higher quality of life in smaller towns. And I think people are really starting to realize that. Like, for example, I was down in downtown Westchester, Pennsylvania today. It's so gorgeous right now. I mean, it's warm out. The trees are blossoming. I mean, it was beautiful. And it's a nice old historic town.
I agree. I agree. I grew up in a very small town. I have a certain fondness, though. I think it's all through rose-colored glasses, because it was also one of those towns where there was literally more cows than people when I was growing up, and I kind of hated it. But
Well, I was in the same spot. Like we smelled all the time from the manure as like the winds change from like the cow pastures.
yeah,
But did you you might not want to admit this because then you might get canceled. Did you cow tip ever when you were a kid?
no, I Jason, you know me. Is my personality like I'm not like danger is not my middle name. I'm not going to go try to cow tip.
Oh my God, that's too good. And speaking of it, like, I'm not going to dox you, but like, you live in a small town now. And historically, that would not be possible to run any sort of financial firm in a small town. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's just amazing what we're able to do these days. And I want to get to GPT and some of the newer stuff in a second, but like to round off some of this sports stuff, what was interesting in sports technology, do you know about Zone 7?
No.
So basically, if you're watching like a British Premier League game or any sort of soccer game these days, you'll notice like the back around their necks, it's like the shirt's bumped up, and you're like, what, did somebody
Yeah.
forget to iron the shirts or something? But those are all trackables and wearables, right? And so what Zone 7 does is they use a neural net to help predict injuries and put that individually with players. And then that way the team can help load management. And if you think about like how unique that is across, hundreds of thousands and millions of data points across hundreds of thousands of players in different leagues and everything, what they're then doing at like the Liverpools of the world is like, okay, this player has run this much. This is a soft tissue exposure. Maybe on this Thursday, they shouldn't participate in these activities because that could lead to a hamstring injury. And then if you think about the economics effects of that, especially if you paid, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in a transfer fee, the economic impact of when your star players aren't playing because you've mismanaged the load management of them. It's really fascinating to think about like what that does.
All right, I want to talk to you about this. I was having a
Okay.
deep conversation with someone else about this, the Whoop strap and the Aura.
Yeah.
You were an athlete. You played at very high levels. Do you think that there is a potential psychological issue with the athletes knowing some of those stats? So, for example, you're an athlete, you get up and you look at your stats and you find, oh, I thought I slept well, but all of a sudden this thing is telling me I didn't sleep well at all. I'm not rested. And then you're carrying that into whatever physical activity you have. And you think to yourself, I shouldn't be able to hit this PR, or I should be this tired running around because I didn't sleep last night, versus there's a little bit of ignorance is bliss, right? I think there's an argument for when your body gets run down, when you're fasted, you develop heightened mental acuity potentially. You develop, right, your body kind of kicks into overdrive naturally to fix that fasting state, to hunt down prey or whatever it is, versus if you're psychologically aware of it, is that a detractor? Right. And I go back and forth on this. I only was thinking about this really recently because of my personal lack of sleep. And yet I have been jumping on the rower and putting up times that somehow have been really good. Now, the days that I got a huge amount of sleep, I felt worse than the days in which I got no sleep and just jumped on and just said, I'm just going to push myself. I wonder if knowing all these stats about yourself can actually be detrimental to the athletes.
100%. So one, this is why I refuse to use like auras. I refuse to do a morning routine or anything because I think that instills fragility and weird feedback loops, and I just don't want to know. Right? It's a good excuse finder. But at the same time, by the way, the other thing you pulled out on, do you know what Yarrick means?
No.
I thought this is where you're
Yarrick?
going. So in falconry, Yarrick, I believe it's an Arabic word, but it basically means when your falcon is hungry but not starving to death. So he's visually acute and he's ready to hunt, but he's choosing the right prey because he's hungry but searching. That's Yarrick. And I thought that's what actually you were going for. It's like that perfect blend of not
I like
full.
that you think that that's where I was going. Like that very particular Arabic word about falconry. That you would think that I was so in tune with you that I was going there.
So, and then, but to your point about the athletes, what people maybe don't realize is like what you're saying is like these athletes are super sensitive people, right? And they're super emotional and they have weird superstitions, especially at the higher and higher levels. And I only know that especially because, as you're referencing, I used to live at the IMG Academy in Florida with all like the professional tennis players. And yeah, if they knew all of those metrics, they would just be a puddle of a nightmare. Like they don't know how to deal with that feedback. So what I think the teams are primarily doing, I mean, I guess individual players, they want to see it, they can. But what they're doing is like they're tracking their sleep, right? They have the nutritionists that are tracking all of their, food intake. They now have like those power plates in the gym and everything to see how like their bipedal exertion is or power, output is. Then they're tracking all that, soft tissue and load management. But I think all that data requires a team to assess that data that's also working with the psychology of the athlete. And that's what Zone 7 said about like, this isn't all about data. You still need humans interacting with this data. But I think you actually want all that data to go to the team doctors and physicians that are managing it. You don't want it to go to the athlete. Because like you said, they can get all in their heads of like, I didn't get sleep last night and everything like that. Like, for example, that whole old wives' tale from the sea that we grew up with, like that you shouldn't have, sex before the game. Like that was actually came about because players were out chasing pussy till 4 a.m. and not getting sleep. It wasn't about them having sex. So That's, one of the old wives' tales that hopefully we've gotten past. But sorry, excuse my crudeness
Thank
as
you
always.
for that, Jim.
Yeah, but so I think it's interesting. I think it has to go to like the team physicians and the team, like, and to work through them, because if it goes to the players, it just doesn't work. But I thought then if you extrapolate that out into other areas of life, like the military or surgeons, it's going to be really fascinating. I think hopefully the surgeons and doctors are finally coming around to this lack of sleep not being a badge of honor, when they're coming up through the ranks, that we actually need adequate sleep. I mean, I would argue that surgeons are almost self-selected, or people that work in the ER, for people that only require that 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night. They're just different kinds of people.
Yeah, I never understood why the entire hospital industry works around that lack of sleep schedule. There's got to be a reason. I presume there is something I don't know and don't understand as to why they operate on that, what I consider to be an absolutely insane schedule. It is proven in so many studies, question studies as you will, that lack of sleep is detrimental to your decision making. Why do you want someone in a life or death decision making situation with lack of sleep? Like, what? Why are we not just letting doctors sleep?
Makes zero sense to me. But like you said, maybe there's a Chesterton fence there that we don't understand. Yeah. By the way, shout out to Scott that said, I never busted a nut before POF. I'm definitely getting us canceled one of these days. I mean, we're getting closer and closer. I apologize. I pre-apologize to you for when I ruined your life. But
when we look at stats as to who watches and listens to this show, it is not surprising to me it's 99.9% men. And the other 0.1% is robots.
Yeah. Are you saying I'm offensive to our female audience?
I'm not saying it's just you. I'm saying we don't do a great job catering to a diverse audience.
Well, speaking of our ladies' agreement, for those that you don't know, Corey and I don't do this for free. We call this our Pirates Pinky Promise. We're here. We're in sweaters in summer, sweating it out for you. So all we ask is that you hit that notification bell. You subscribe, tell a friend about the show. The people that are listening to this on audio are missing out. They should be here live and participate in the Booty Crew chat comments. But this is that beautiful Pirates Pinky Promise that we come to you with every week. We show up. Now we need you to show up for us. Corey, you got anything to add to the Pirates Pinky Promise other than you? Is it growing on you? Is it?
As I said, PPP loans coming soon.
So one of the things, not a bone to pick with you, but I was perusing the internet and learning this week from the great Corey Hofstein. And part of it is, by the way, there's two things. The Inception one, where like I put an idea in your brain every month for 18 months, and then you think it's your own, which is fantastic. I mean, that's the only joy I get in life.
You take a lot of credit for things I think. You take a lot of credit for things I think, my friend.
Can I finish? The other one you'd love to
carefully.
Yeah. The other is I sometimes have notes where I'm going another show, but I love how you always interject and you front run me and you just tell my entire story before I get a chance to. So that's the other one. So what I mean by that, why I bring that up was we were both I was recently on, and shout out to you because you're the one that got me on there, the Excess Returns podcast to show us your portfolio. And I listened to yours before I was supposed to go on there, and I was like, Corey just said everything I was going to say, so I don't know what I'm going to do here.
Well, yeah, I did steal everything I was going to say from you. It was
no,
great.
You didn't. No, you didn't. But it was, once again, I was just like, I have nothing to add. But why I bring that up, what I want to talk about in that sense was you started talking about a discussion you and I have had many times, and I'm not saying, I mean, you probably came up with sui generis, has nothing to do with me, so I just want to turn that back around. But the idea of bond-like incomes. Like when we talk about people and their jobs, ideally people should think about whether your income is a bond-like income like a doctor or a equity-like income like an entrepreneur. And then that's a way to overarchingly think about your portfolio at a high level. So then when you have savings left over that you don't need for your business or your job or for your life expenses, is like when you go to invest those, is how you should align those investments with what your income is like. So if you have a bond-like income, maybe you need to be more equities. If you have an equity-like crazy income like we have, maybe you need to be more like bond structures. And I just think that's a fascinating way to kind of think about the world and break it down. Like I think I talked to my my sister and her husband a long time ago about this. They're surgeons, right? And they're in Miami, so they get upset like as their friends that are just like flipping real estate or whatever will make millions of dollars in a year. and they're like, they feel like they're not keeping up with the Joneses. But then, as we know, a few years later, they're going to lose everything, those friends.
Right,
Meanwhile, they're just chugging along at that bond-like income. So I was like trying to explain to them in the same way. It's like, you went for a bond-like income. They're going for an equity. I would say equity, but it's more like a VC, PE. I don't know what's it, like crypto-like equity income.
Right. Yeah, I think we focus so much time on investment capital, the discussion of investment capital, because it's liquid. We can move it around. The returns are incredibly tangible to us. We get the feedback loop every single day of what the market is pricing. Did it go up? Did it go down? You have a ton of optionality in terms of what you're investing in. We don't think of our careers the same way, right? I think it's stickier. We think of it as being less liquid. There's more, I guess, friction in trying to change what your human capital is, right? All those things. But that human capital is a huge driver of your long-term wealth. And the nature of the human capital should be thought in conjunction with the investment capital, because that is your total capital. And I do really think that thinking for most people, I would say 95% plus of the population, your human capital does look like a bond. Now, the degree of what type of bond is going to depend on the business you're in. If you're in a super cyclical business, right, it's a very different bond than if you're in a business that really doesn't ebb and flow. I'm sure doctors, for example, don't have like that is a very high quality corporate bond, right? And they're getting tons of income from it. Versus if you're in a super cyclical industry, boom, bust, that might be a high yield bond, right? That you got to get paid when you get paid because you're going to go bust and find a new job. So, but still modeling that out, I think can be important, because you can say, wow, if I do a discounted cash flow analysis of all those future potential payments, that's a huge value that is in this structural bond position. Like, why am I holding so many bonds in my investment capital? Do I need to? Like, am I only doing that for liability matching purposes, or should I potentially actually be thinking about being more aggressive with that, because I need to barbell what I'm doing on the human capital side? There is an argument, by the way, that's been placed by a lot of sort of personal finance researchers who say, like, young people, like young investors in their early 20s, should not just be all equities. They should be levered equities, because their human capital at that point of 40 plus years of working is such a huge proportion of their total capital that they need to lever up their equity exposure to offset it.
Right, but that's also an assumption of ceteris paribus or ergodicity, right? That's part of the rub with that. And I would argue whether you have a bond-like or equity-like income, your savings should be in like long volatility, just to hedge your risks in general. Like, you shouldn't be doubling down on bonds or equities or anything that's long GDP or long liquidity. That's neither here nor there. The other one, it made me think though, do surgeons or most doctors have a bond-like income? Is it more like a commercial real estate like income? They have a tiny equity tranche when they get started. They have all this massive debt. And they got to pay down that debt over 20, 25 years.
I wasn't thinking about the debt. I wasn't thinking about the debt. That's a good point. Well, that's just a huge short liability that you owe, I guess.
Yeah. Another one that came up for me with kind of your cohort, not necessarily your cohort, but like the ETF stock world and everything, is like, I've always kind of wanted to do an ETF and call it SHIT. SHIT, right? And we buy overpriced shit and underpriced shit. So you're pairing deep value with just Momo, right? Like, on what's making a monthly high and keeping the next month and just rotating that out. Like, what's wrong with that? Why wouldn't that work?
Well, momentum isn't always overpriced shit, to be clear. So if you're saying you're buying deep value shit and you're pairing it with overpriced shit, I think you're just going to get a net canceling out effect of positive versus negative alpha. If you're buying deep value shit plus Momo, well, you're talking about value and momentum, which is two of, at least historically, the most powerful style premia you can incorporate in your portfolio. There's a lot of funds out there that do value and momentum together.
No, but what's one called where, like, whatever's made a new high this month, you keep that in the portfolio till the next month, and like you're just looking for the ones that made a new high. Like Meb's done some like back tests on that or something, right? What's that called?
It's a 52-week high strategy typically.
Yes.
I mean, you're typically either doing a breakout or you're looking at some trailing period, right? So you're buying stuff that's 52-week high. It's a little weird, right? Because you go, well, what happens if everything's in a drawdown? That gets a little more complicated because then you say, well, if nothing's making a new high, what am I including? And then so you either make the decision that it's incorporating some aspect of trend following, that you're only buying stuff making 52-week highs, and if nothing's making 52-week highs, you're holding cash, right? Then you now have a trend following component to it to a certain degree, or you're only looking at relative 52-week returns, in which case it's just a momentum strategy.
Yeah. Well, I think what you know too well is like, I want to call it shit and overpriced and underpriced shit because of how those two worlds look at each other, right? The value world is never going to buy stuff at 52-week high because they think that's overpriced shit. And that the 52-week high or Momo world is never going to buy deep value because they think that's underpriced shit. And so like I'm playing off both those worlds. Why? And usually those worlds don't cross because everybody, once again, they see things as they are, and see things as we are, not as they are.
Well, this is one of the most fascinating times in the market to me. I think there's a lot of things about the last couple of years that'll be studied decades hence. But when you look at the overlap in value and momentum today, I mean, the factor correlations of value and momentum are near and have been near all-time highs for the last couple of months. It's a very unusual thing. Typically, when something starts doing really well, it stops being value and becomes momentum. It sort of graduates out. And these are style premia that operate on different time horizons. Momentum is something you refresh very frequently. It has very high turnover. Value is something tends to be a lot more slow moving. So they don't have to operate in tandem, but they typically, what you see again is if something's doing really well, it doesn't tend to be cheap. What has happened, at least it seems to have happened, is the valuation between deep value and growth stocks has gotten so wide that even though value names are starting to outperform, there's such a gap there in the valuation that they can still be momentum and value names. So you get this really unique time. It happened back in the 2000s as well. We'll see if value keeps its run going, but it's really interesting to think that you have these momentum chasers as well as value folks piling into the same names. It's a pretty rare phenomenon. It's pretty fun to watch in real time.
I want to, as everything, you just succinctly sum up everything so perfectly. I just sit in awe. I just want to golf clap. And I just know, like, I actually pause after. That way it gives Tyler time to cut him because, like, that's how perfect that one is. So I'll change subjects on a little bit. I want to give you some tendies for thought, some nugs for thought, if you will.
Ooh, nuggets for thought.
Yeah. So shout out to Dimitri Kofinas. I was listening to, I think it was the latest Hidden Forces. He had John Borthwick on, and they were talking about GPT. And they were saying it was interesting. He had a thesis that like GPT kills SaaS because like if any company can internally spin out a GPT to provide the software and the whatever things they need internally to reduce that drudge work, like why would you ever invest in a SaaS company again? Like the whole Constellation Software's whole business model around VMS. Like does GPT make it so we have internal GPTs at every small firm and we no longer need like these vertically integrated SaaS products?
All right, nail that down for me with an example. Like, is there a concrete example of how that plays out?
I'll try to think of a concrete one. Like right what's popping in my head is just like some stupid software, like or simple software we have for like taxes and stuff, or like whatever it is, or like internally, you and I use a lot of vendor software to do a lot of the things we need to do in the finance space. So why would you need vendor software anymore if you could use natural language to have GPT spin up that similar software to your bespoke needs?
Well, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to, do you trust the GPT to do it correctly, right? Do you eventually want that human oversight?
There, yeah. Well, you're still going to have the human oversight, but like, we're talking about 4 right now. What does 5 and 6 potentially look like, right?
I mean, I think you're talking about the generalized ability to spin anything up, right? I don't want to call it generalized intelligence because that's not really what we're getting at here, but generalized expertise in the ability to dial in and build customized solutions. I'm not sure. I struggle with that, right? It's the AI's coming for lawyers, the AI's coming for coders, the AI is coming for truck drivers. Like AI's taking everyone's job. I'm just not sure I buy that. You and I have discussed that in the past, and I'm not sure I see people going, I want to spend the time with GPT to tell it what I want when I'm not even sure I'm an expert enough to know what I want, right? I hire a tax expert to do my taxes for me because they're complicated enough that I know I don't know what I don't know, and I'm not going to be able to figure it out, and I'm just going to pay someone to do that for me. Right. So when I think about some of the vendor software I use, I'm not sure when I was looking for vendor software, I would have known to build in some of the features that I ended up needing. Right. It takes a certain amount of domain expertise to build that stuff. And so just because you can ask GPT to build it for you, you're still that assumes you know the questions to ask. And I'm not sure it's there. Now, that doesn't mean I would argue it could be the other way. These SaaS companies might be able to spin up faster because they're accelerated by the use of GPT to not have to build all the scaffolding. But I'm not sure why I would looking at like my suite of vendor software. Like, again, there's just when I was evaluating software, there's things I don't know to ask.
By the way, Menhem said in the comments, like, it's like, why pay Salesforce to do a CRM if GPT can do it all for you? Like, that was another good example. But like, to your point, Taylor and I were having this conversation earlier, is like, how do we be both excited and acknowledge the rate and pace of change with GPT, but circumspect about, is it going to be revolutionary, right? And I think a good analog is crypto and blockchain, right? When you get really excited about blockchain years ago, you're like, this is it, it's all over, everything changes. And similarly, we're doing now, but like that adoption curve, is long, right? And you always have that dip kind of in between as well. But part of that though is, I want to come back to this discussion.
Wait,
but
hold on. I want to thank you for bringing up Bitcoin and blockchain technology, because one Bitcoin hit 30,000 good old American dollars overnight.
That Balaji bump.
Night. Up 83% year to date. 83%.
Balaji bump.
My
so
goodness.
Okay. So have you messed around with Auto GPT now?
No.
Okay. So a couple of things. One, we want to be circumspect about how revolutionary this is. Does it put people out of jobs, or all that stuff is remains to be seen. But Auto GPT, for my lack of knowledge, is basically they're using multiple GPT platforms to work in unison together, where they're also trying to provide the prompts. So like you're saying, I don't know what language to use for the prompts maybe, and now you can use multiple GPTs together, and now it's creating just like the exponential change that's creating with using them to almost prompt each other.
That sort of reminds me of the concept of adversarial training. Like when you're training certain AI programs, you train it against a program built specifically to poke at weaknesses, which then helps the AI learn its weaknesses and become more robust and stronger. The idea of feeding these things into each other, sort of like calling two operators and connecting the lines and having them sorted out. Yeah, I think it's fascinating connecting these different GPTs, these different expert AIs, having them collaborate, work together. I saw an interesting thread where someone had used GPT and hooked it up to a chemistry API that could actually do physical things in a lab and was starting to put together like these chemical reactions. And the GPT at a certain point said, I can't go any further. This is a dangerous chemical. But very, very cool to sort of connect it to the outside world in different ways.
Yeah. So, listening to this podcast and thinking about that and how it may affect SaaS businesses and everything, I started to think about, and what's been kind of like living in my head rent free or keep coming back to this last week is like, does this kill the VC industry? And what I mean by that is like, historically, I think it was the original OpenAI or something that cost like $100 million, right? And then some of the other AI firms then were able to build it for 10 million. Now we're sub 1 million. Now we're just like, sub 1 million, a few terabytes. And like, so the whole rubric of the VC industry is to provide tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars to build out basically software companies. So like, does that basically reduce I don't think VCs are ever going to go away, but I think it was interesting about now the cost of starting up software companies specifically has dramatically come down with GPT. Now, unfortunately, I'll get ahead of you on this one. Just let me finish. Okay, go. Wait, let me finish because you're going to love where I'm going here. So I'm thinking about that all week. And then unfortunately, this morning, I listened to some of the All In podcast and Chamath was saying the same thing. So now I had to just stab myself in the face.
Yeah. God, there's, I made a comment on Twitter. We were going back and forth or something, and this person said, well, Auntie Ilmanen said blah, blah, blah. And I said, if I ever find myself on the opposite end of an argument as Auntie Ilmanen, I assume I'm wrong. If I ever find myself on the same side of an argument as Chamath, I assume I'm wrong.
Exactly.
I'm sorry. That guy is just painful for me to listen to. Okay. God, there's so much to say. The idea that VCs are going to be put out of business because the cost of starting a company goes down, that's the history of companies, right? When my father, who was a tech entrepreneur, started businesses in the 80s and 90s, they had to raise capital to buy hardware servers in a physical building and hire IT people to maintain those servers. And it was incredibly expensive. And then you go into the 2000s and Amazon builds the cloud, and EC2 is able to inspire a golden era of VC because it was cheaper for people to start companies, right? I'm not sure, okay, you can also argue, okay, it was a low interest rate environment and cash was free and people needed to take more risk, and there's all sorts of incentives for more cash coming into VC because of low interest rates. But I look at a huge part of it as being it costs less to start a business, so they could allocate to a lot more companies. There was a lot more opportunity for people to take that risk. There was a lot more opportunity for people to be entrepreneurial because someone didn't have to look at this and say, for me to try to start my business, I need to raise 10 million. They went, I could raise 100,000 friends and family, prove it out, host it on Amazon. Great. Now all I need to do is raise $1,000 and get the scaffolding from Chat-GPT, get the website up and running, connect the dots. Great. I proved it. Now I can go raise money from VCs to scale this. I don't see how you can look at what happened in the early 2010s and say, wow, the cost of starting a company went way down. That really sucked for VCs. It put VCs out of business. It did the exact opposite.
Man, I teed you up for that one. But too, it's like,
I'm so angry. Why do you make me so angry on Fridays?
It's because we're wearing these hot ass sweaters. So that's why we're angry. But part of it too, like your point is, you may be able to spin up the company and have an MVP, a proof of concept. But as we both know, over 50% of any startup or VC's budget now is advertising to get the people to know about it, right, on Google or Facebook, because there's so much competition, right? Like if you can start a business for under $1,000, it's 1,000 flowers blooming. So now you got how do you make some noise? And that's where the cost is going to come from.
I would love to know. I don't know if you know this. I would love to know, when you look at VC dollars spent, what proportion of VC dollars spent were on user acquisition versus all other expenses. So, for example, building the actual technology, research infrastructure, that sort of stuff, versus just this money was burnt for user acquisition, whether it was Uber subsidizing rides or, explicit marketing costs. I would love to just see high level percentage breakdown.
And just pulling it out of my ass, I remember seeing some studies in the last year that was like 50 to 60%, especially in the last few years. So I don't know how true is that.
Is the edge as a VC company now saying, we're not just going to give you money, right? Because anyone can give you money. Yeah. We can help you attract customers. We know the channels better than anyone else, right? To rewind a couple episodes, talking about someone like Pomp becoming his own distribution for his own businesses. At a certain point, does a VC company say, hey, we have to run our own podcast, right? So that we can promote our own corporate family of companies.
You know why I'm getting so excited? Because this is Chamath's argument that now you're agreeing with.
Fuck.
That's the future, right? That like distribution is the future. So like people like JCal with Twist or, All In making these bones is like, if you have the distribution, right? And you can lower that cost instead of having to pay those third-party ad, rates that are just, escalating on Facebook and Google platforms. That's kind of the argument that the future is, they all love to to jerk off about Jimmy at Mr. Beast, you know, that's always their primary example. But that's what they're saying is like every business now in the future will be built on the backs of an influencer because of the distribution mechanism.
Yeah, I fucking hate that I agree with them. I'm wrong. I take back everything I said. I don't know what the right answer is, but I'm clearly wrong.
So a couple of other things. One, because we were talking about the all-in guys. Did you see any of the stuff with Crazy Bob Lee, one of the co-founders of Cash App, got murdered in San Francisco?
I did see that he got murdered. Everyone thought it was random, and then it ended up not being random.
And so what happened on All In, like last week, they all went on their rants and raves and their same tropes about how San Francisco's a zombie apocalypse and it's a dystopian world. And like, this is why, you know, like they shitting on all the politicians in San Francisco and all this stuff for these random acts of violence by the homeless and the crazy and all that stuff. And then it turned out it was an inside job, right? It was by a friend of his. By the way, I read through friend of his as like, I'm not sure if they were a couple or they're friends or what happened at 2:30 in the morning where he stabbed him to death. But it was interesting. It's like at least Freeberg on All In, like listen to some of it this morning. He at least like pointed out this idea at Anais Nin that we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are, and how quick all of them were to jump to as like a crazy homeless person. And then they all backpedaled the fuck out of it and be like, no, the grander point still stands and like all this stuff. And like they kept like just shouting down Freeberg about it. Like when he was trying to be like, guys, look what you did here.
I have two thoughts. They are the fucking worst. I two thoughts like that, like Freeberg. I don't have as big an issue with as the other.
Still, he talks about Dalio, but yeah,
the other three I take more issue with. But my bigger problem here is why are you listening to them?
Oh, it's
like you and I hate watch content.
No, yeah, you and I hate watch a lot of stuff, and I just like it's like well, you know, it's like most content, like while you're doing something else, you know, while you're taking a shit, like you can listen to this nonsense. Okay. And to me, it's like sentiment trading. It's like seeing what because you know the hundreds of thousands or millions of people that listen to them, it's gonna be the echo chamber, and you're gonna hear the same shit. It's like how many people like just garbage repeat Balaji all the time. So it's like I have to listen to Balaji's nonsense just so I know what people are talking about.
Yeah. Can I throw something really random out there?
Yeah,
this has nothing to do.
No, this show is very structured. No random thoughts.
I know, but talking about content that I've been thinking about all week, I learned about something that I'm putting this out there because I really want someone to reach out to me and tell me why this is not true. But I learned about this concept called, and this is by the way nothing to do with markets. This has just been haunting me all week. This idea called end of life dreams and visions. Yes. And it was this article.
Now you're talking my language. I'm in.
Oh my God. So the article was basically talking about how there is this largely undocumented phenomenon that when people get towards end of life, they tend to have increasingly vivid dreams and hallucinations that involve deceased loved ones beckoning them into the afterlife, whether it's across a river or across a field or whatever it is. Those people in hospice, they did a study. Those in hospice, when they enter hospice, they report that their dreams tend to be first of the people who are still in their life and still alive. And on a degree of how comforting those dreams are, from a 1 to a 5, they tend to be in the mid 2s. And as they get towards end of life, the dreams are pretty much solely about those people who are deceased. They become increasingly vivid to the point of hallucination. And they are on a scale of like 1 to 5 in terms of how comforting they are. They're like a 5. And so this article started with this guy talking about how his wife was checked into hospice. All of her vitals started improving. And he met with the doctor, and the doctor said, well, there's good news and bad news. The good news is, you know, all your wife's vitals are improving. The bad news is your wife called in the nurses last night to tell them that her parents were in a boat outside the window, beckoning her to come with them. And she said, in my experience, those sort of dreams tend to mean that the person is going to pass away in the next 48 hours. And then she passed away in the next 24 hours. This shit has me so terrified now. This is one of those things, anytime I dream, if I ever have a dream now about deceased relatives, I am going to assume I'm dying in the next 24 hours. I need a doctor to tell me why this is bullshit.
Oh man, so many things in there. One, you're just gonna go back to the clip where I ask you if you're conscious, right? Like, so every morning I gotta call you and be like, "Hey, did you dream about your dead relatives?" Like, I already do it. I always mess with my mother-in-law. I'm like, "Do you smell lavender?" And like, the whole like, "Do you smell toast?" Like whenever she says
Yeah.
anything crazy. But so there's a couple things you said in there that I think are tangential but somewhat interesting. Is like the how interesting it is that we probably all likely have the same brain chemical releases before we die, and how neuroprotective our brain is also for us to like die in peace is very interesting. And there's some people that argue that like DMT is the God molecule or the death mode, that when we die, our brain releases DMT, which is where you're getting these hallucinations. And I'm not sure what to make of like when people have similar ones. It's like when people do DMT, they also talk to the serpent god, but it's like, is that because everybody told them they talked to the serpent god before? And so you're preconditioned to think so. One of the other one that's always interested me about this end of life stuff is like people always have out of body experiences where they say they're floating above themselves and they can see themselves and they're very adamant about it. Well, there was a study, I think it was in Switzerland, where they put like a LED display on top of the dresser that would print out words and phrases. And every single person that said they like, what did the LED say? And they're like, they have no like they didn't see it. So like, once again, it's a hallucinatory effect, but it actually, it comes down to the orientation awareness zone of our brain. Like if you're ever in a very traumatic experience, what they found with like extreme sports athletes or people like trapped in a cave with broken bones is our brain actually, as we're shutting down functions to stay alive, one of the last ones to go is our orientation awareness zone. And that's the one that makes you feel like there's a difference between the end of your finger and the world out there. And it starts to blend as we're shutting down functions of our brain, almost like corridors shutting down doors or lights shutting off. So all this stuff is really fascinating. Does it mean anything? I don't know. And like, should you be worried about dreaming of like your dead relatives? I like in a boat? Like,
Well,
I guess
now I'm
you have to wait for the
terrified.
boat.
I'm terrified to go to sleep now.
Well,
I don't want to wake up in the morning and be like, wow, I saw my grandparents. I'm fucked.
Yeah. And how much of those are culturally relevant and everything. I don't know if this is true. I need to really look this up. But I was in a book the other day, it said something like the placebo effect has only been replicable in America. So I don't know how true that is. That'll be interesting to find out if that one's true or not. It's just one of those things I saw. I was like, man, I got to really look that one up. But seeing how we're on this mode of scaring the shit out of you, as a new father, Taylor was telling me about one the other day I haven't seen yet, is that people are now using AI bots and everything to replicate the children's voices. And then they're calling up the parents and saying they've been kidnapped and running scams to get them to pay the kidnappers with fake AI voices of their kids.
So I've two thoughts here. My sister years ago, remember they were doing that scam of like, they were calling and saying it's the police and so is in trouble and you got to get all these, you got to go to Best Buy and buy the gift cards, or, like they called my sister and started to run that scam on her, and bless her heart, she started to fall for it. And then she was like, this is kind of weird. I'm just going to go to the police station. And the scammers were like, don't go to the police station. That's, whatever it is. So she ended up not falling for it. I did see that, I think, from Tyler, who sent it to us. And my two thoughts were, there's a reason I don't want my child on social media. First, now they're too young anyway. First, they don't have a choice. Me putting them out there in the world, to me, seems very unfair. Like they need to get to a point where they can make that decision themselves as to whether they want to be public out in the world. So I don't really agree with parents putting their children out on social media. I find it very, I don't know, just whatever. I'm not going to go down that hole. People do what they want. But to that point, thinking about, okay, where are they getting the voices to train the AI? Like to get the child, you first like if you want to scam the parents that the children have been kidnapped, you need to figure out what that child's voice sounds like.
Right.
Well, how's that happen? Well, the kid's uploading all their videos to TikTok, right? So I sent a message to my family and I said, look, I am out there enough on the internet with podcasts. It would not be hard for someone to replicate my voice, and call you and say I've been kidnapped, and they would probably have a pretty accurate representation of my voice. So I said, so the answer is you have to come up with keywords, right? Code words, things I would actually say, right? And that's how I've been kidnapped. And the code word I came up with, just so everyone knows, is no, guys, I've actually been kidnapped this time. This is not AI.
So there's a couple of things in there because I was thinking about the similar thing. Is like, how do you have that word or phrase, but then like don't say it around your house because you have all the different devices listening around your house. Like
Right.
you have to write it down and all that stuff. But like I would just default to no, just say go ahead, kill him. Who cares? We don't care about Corey.
Yes.
Like
That's what I said to my wife. I said, if someone
Yeah.
calls you and says I've been kidnapped, just hang up.
Yeah.
Just hang up.
That's the
If
only
it's
thing you
real,
could.
they'll call back or they'll kill me and you'll get some insurance money.
Can't wait to see those future Proof of Lives.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, great
It'll be on the
movie,
blockchain.
highly underrated. Proof of Life is a phenomenal movie. Have you ever seen it? Highly underrated. Russell Crowe and Meg Ryan. Oh, it's a great movie.
Know
Great.
what movie I'm ashamed to admit that I kind of want to watch is this new Avatar movie that's finally out. Dude,
ladies and gentlemen, seriously, other pirates on this is our last episode. Corey just displayed his love for Avatar. Are you fucking kidding me?
No,
show is over.
I hated the first movie. And I was like, how in the world are they doing a second movie? The amount of money that movie made is astonishing. And so I feel like I need to watch it just to get understand the psyche of fellow human beings.
Well, you just said this is why I watch or listen to All In or Grant Cardone or whatever. It's that hate watching to figure out what's going on in society. But in fairness, I'm not shitting on you because I had to learn the hard way. Like my brother-in-law is incredibly intelligent, multiple degrees from Ivy League institutions, everything. He fucking loves superhero movies and I hate him. And I just like, how could you be so dumb? But like he loves it and he's highly intelligent. So there's no accounting for taste. Watch what you want to watch.
Superhero movies, it depends on the movie. I will tell you, I am stoked for the new Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse animated one. I don't know if you ever saw the original animated. Dude, it is honestly, I think one of the best movies of the last decade.
Why do you think it's because you want to be superheroes? I don't get it. Why do you?
No, it's the art style of this movie is so phenomenal. I just have a huge appreciation. It was a well done, cute movie. It is a superhero movie, but less in the degree of like the Marvel stuff. So it doesn't take itself nearly as seriously. It's much more comic book like. The art style is unbelievable from a visual experience. We have veered so far off course. Right. This is like the Pirates of Nonsense. This is not the Pirates of Finance. This is the Pirates of Nonsense.
No, for once I self-censored myself, which is a huge victory for me. So I'm just gonna leave it there. Why don't you take us out?
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Pirates of Nonsense. We greatly appreciate you joining us on this Friday afternoon. Next week, maybe we'll talk about markets. Maybe we'll talk about economics. Probably not. For all those of you in the Booty crew who joined us live, we sincerely appreciate you. For all those of you listening later, we appreciate you just as much. We hope you will fulfill your end of the Pirate Pinky promise, if only because Jason made me say that. And it just feels weird saying the Pirate Pinky promise.
Corey, are you kidnapped? Is that your code word? Pirates Pinky promise.
Exactly. If I get kidnapped, I will say Pirate Pinky promise. Hit that like button. Leave an inflammatory comment. Get the algo churning. Send us up the charts. We appreciate you. Have a wonderful weekend. We will see you next week.